The alarm screamed at 5 in the morning, the same relentless digital shriek that had dragged Jordan Hayes from sleep every single day for the past 3 years. She reached out from under the thin comforter, fingers fumbling across the nightstand until they found the button that silenced the noise. For exactly 4 seconds, she allowed herself to lie there in the darkness of her bedroom, feeling the weight of exhaustion press against her bones like something physical and crushing. Then she swung her legs over the edge of the mattress and stood, because lying there would not pay the rent or put food in her daughter's belly or keep the lights on in their tiny apartment on Detroit's east side. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman who looked older than 28. Dark circles carved shadows beneath brown eyes that used to sparkle before life taught her that sparkling cost energy she could not afford to waste. Jordan splashed cold water on her face, the shock of it pulling her fully into consciousness, then brushed her teeth with a toothbrush worn down to nubs she kept meaning to replace. The fluorescent light above the sink flickered twice before settling into its usual harsh glow, illuminating the crack that spiderwebbed across the mirror's upper corner. She had stopped seeing it months ago, the way she had stopped seeing most of the apartment's decay. Seeing it meant acknowledging it, and acknowledging it meant feeling the weight of how far she had fallen from the life she once imagined for herself. The kitchen occupied one corner of the living room, separated from the sleeping area by a counter that had probably been white once, but now showed the yellowed stains of decades. Jordan opened the cabinet above the sink, already knowing what she would find, but hoping somehow that the inventory had magically improved overnight. One box of generic cornflakes, the cardboard soft with age and the contents reduced to maybe 2 servings. Half a carton of milk in the refrigerator that hummed loud enough to wake the neighbors, but barely managed to keep anything cold. She poured carefully, making the milk stretch as far as physics would allow, filling Zoe's bowl until it looked reasonably full, even though she knew her daughter would still be hungry in an hour. Jordan did not pour a second bowl. There was not enough, and even if there had been, Zoe's needs came first. They always came first. That was the mathematics of single motherhood, the calculus that governed every decision from what to eat to whether she could afford to buy herself a pair of shoes without holes. She had eaten yesterday, sort of. A customer's leftover fries at the diner, half a sandwich Linda had insisted she take home. It would be fine. She could make it to her break at the laundromat, maybe grab something from the vending machine if she had quarters. The bedroom door opened, and Zoe emerged, 6 years old and small for her age, rubbing sleep from her eyes with the backs of her hands. Her pajamas, handed down from a coworker's daughter, hung loose on her thin frame. The inhaler sat on the coffee table where Jordan had placed it the night before within easy reach, in case Zoe's asthma flared during the night. It had been 3 weeks since the last refill, and they were running low again, each puff a small financial crisis that Jordan tried not to think about too hard, because thinking about it would not make the money materialize. Zoe's voice came out soft and raspy, still thick with sleep. "Morning, Mama." Jordan's heart contracted the way it always did when her daughter spoke a physical ache that was half love and half terror at the responsibility of keeping this small person alive and safe in a world that seemed designed to crush people like them. She crossed the room and kissed the top of Zoe's head, breathing in the scent of the baby shampoo they bought at the dollar store because name brands were a luxury that belonged to someone else's life. "Morning, baby. Come eat your breakfast." Zoe climbed into the chair that wobbled on one short leg, a problem Jordan had tried to fix with folded cardboard that kept slipping out of place. The girl looked at the bowl of cereal, then up at her mother with eyes that saw too much for someone so young. "Where's yours? Already ate," Jordan lied, the words coming easily now, after 3 years of practice. "You go ahead." The apartment building where they lived had been constructed sometime in the 1960s, back when Detroit still believed in its own permanence before the auto industry collapsed and took half the city with it. Now the place sagged like an old boxer who had taken too many hits, paint peeling from the exterior walls in long strips that revealed older layers underneath like archaeological strata of neglect. The radiator clanked and hissed, but produced more noise than heat, and the windows rattled in their frames whenever the wind picked up. Jordan paid $850 a month for this decay, which was still more than she could reliably afford, but less than anywhere else that would accept someone with her credit score and employment history. Rent was due in 3 days. She had $703 in the coffee can hidden in the back of the kitchen cabinet, the result of 2 months of sacrifice and careful calculation. She was $147 short. The landlord, Frank Delgado, had already threatened eviction once when she was late last year, had stood in her doorway with his gut hanging over his belt, and told her in a voice that tried to sound reasonable that he was running a business, not a charity. Jordan had begged for an extension, had promised the money by the end of the week, had delivered it by taking a double shift at the diner and skipping her own meals for 4 days straight. She would not beg again. She would find the money somehow, the way she always found it, through some combination of will and exhaustion, and the small miracles that occasionally interrupted the grinding machinery of poverty. Her car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it, had broken down 3 weeks ago in the laundromat parking lot. The transmission, the mechanic had said, looking at her with the particular expression mechanics reserve for people who clearly could not afford to hear bad news. $800 to fix, maybe more, depending on what else they found once they opened it up. Jordan had nodded, thanked him, and left the car in the lot because paying to tow it somewhere else was money she did not have either. So now she walked 2 miles to the laundromat where her morning shift started at 7. 3 miles from there to Rosie's Diner where she worked evening swings. 2.5 miles home afterward, usually close to midnight, her feet screaming in sneakers held together by duct tape and determination. The left sole had developed a hole last week right through the bottom where her heel struck the pavement. She could feel every pebble, every crack in the sidewalk, each step a small, sharp reminder of the distance between where she was and where she needed to be. New shoes cost money. Everything cost money. The electric bill had an overdue notice taped to the refrigerator. Red letters shouting about disconnection dates and late fees. Zoe's asthma inhaler was nearly empty, and the prescription refill cost $60 at the pharmacy, even with the discount program she had spent an hour on the phone qualifying for. The numbers swirled in Jordan's head constantly, a mental spreadsheet that never balanced columns of needs stretching infinitely beyond columns of resources. But Jordan did not complain. Complaining changed nothing, and her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her own mother disappeared into the chaos of addiction and bad choices, had taught her that much before a stroke took her too. Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we got to give. The old woman had said that constantly had lived by it, had died believing it. Jordan tried to honor that memory even when the world made it difficult, even when every interaction felt like a transaction she could not afford. She smiled at her coworkers even when exhaustion made her want to collapse. She asked customers at the diner how their day was going, even when her feet hurt so badly she could barely stand. She kept a small notebook beside her bed where she wrote 3 things she was grateful for every night, no matter how terrible the day had been. Last night she had written, 1, Zoe is healthy. 2, we have a roof over our heads. 3, tomorrow is a new day. The exercise felt hollow sometimes, like performing gratitude for an audience of 1, but it was all she had to keep the despair from swallowing her whole. Tuesday morning arrived like every other morning, indifferent to her struggles. Jordan walked Zoe to Mrs. Shaw Henderson's apartment 2 doors down, an elderly woman who watched the girl before school for $20 a week that Jordan could barely spare, but had to pay because childcare was non-negotiable, and Mrs. Henderson was the cheapest option available. The woman answered the door in her bathrobe, sleep still crusted in the corners of her eyes, and waved Zoe inside without much ceremony. Jordan kissed her daughter goodbye, promised to be home by bedtime, and headed out into the November cold that cut through her thin jacket like it was made of paper. The laundromat smelled like detergent and mildew, a combination that had stopped registering in Jordan's nose after the first week of employment. Sudsy's Laundry occupied a storefront that had once been something else, the ghost of previous signage still visible beneath the current paint job. Industrial washers lined one wall, dryers along the other, and between them stretched folding tables where Jordan spent 8 hours a day processing other people's dirty clothes. The work was mindless, repetitive, exactly the kind of labor that machines would eventually replace entirely, but for now it paid $11 an hour and did not require a degree she did not have. She clocked in at 6:57, 3 minutes early, because being on time meant being late in the mathematics of hourly employment. Her coworker, Linda Kowalski, was already there, a Polish woman in her mid-50s who had worked at Sudsy's for going on 2 decades and had seen enough struggling single mothers pass through to recognize the signs. Linda had a kind face that gravity was slowly pulling downward, gray hair she kept short for practical reasons, and a cigarette habit that forced her outside every hour for a smoke break she took whether the boss approved or not. The older woman looked up from the sorting table as Jordan approached, and something in her expression shifted. "You look tired, honey." Jordan forced a smile that did not reach her eyes, the same smile she had been perfecting for 3 years. "I'm always tired, Linda. It's my natural state at this point. You work yourself to death for that little girl." The observation came without judgment, just statement of fact from someone who understood how the world worked for women like them. "She's worth it." Jordan meant it completely. Felt the truth of it in her bones, even as her body screamed for rest it would not receive. Linda patted her arm, nicotine-stained fingers warm against Jordan's skin. "I know she is, but you gotta take care of yourself too. You hear me? Can't pour from an empty cup." They both knew she did not have that luxury, that taking care of herself was a privilege reserved for people with savings accounts and health insurance, and someone to fall back on when things went sideways. Jordan nodded anyway, accepted the concern, and turned to the first bin of laundry waiting to be folded. Jeans, towels, sheets, the endless cycle of fabric that needed to be cleaned and organized and returned to customers who paid by the pound. Her hands moved on autopilot muscle memory, guiding the work, while her mind calculated and recalculated the numbers that never added up correctly. $23 in tips from last night's shift at the diner, she reminded herself, plus the $8.47 she had left from the day before. $31.47 total. She needed to keep enough for bus fare to work tomorrow, which was 47 cents each way. That left her with $30.53. 23 of that had to go toward rent, toward closing that $147 gap, which left $7.53 for everything else until Friday, when her paycheck from the diner cleared. 53 cents would cover tomorrow's bus fare. That left $7 even. $7 for food, for emergencies, for the thousands of small necessities that arose without warning. $7. She tried not to think about what $7 meant in practical terms, how little it bought, how quickly it disappeared. Thinking about it made her chest tight and her breathing shallow and brought her dangerously close to the edge of panic she could not afford to approach. The morning stretched long, each hour marked by the industrial rhythm of washing machines cycling through their programs. Jordan folded clothes until her fingers cramped, sorted loads by color and fabric, typed sprayed stain remover on collars and underarms with the concentrated efficiency of someone who had performed this exact sequence 10,000 times. During her break, she sat in the small employee area behind the washing machines and counted the money again, as if touching the bills might somehow make them multiply. $7. She tucked them carefully into her wallet, put the wallet into her purse, and returned to work. The shift ended at 3 in the afternoon. Jordan clocked out, shouldered her purse, and began the 3-mile walk to Rosie's Diner across town. Her feet hurt before she made it a block, the hole in her left shoe allowing cold air and occasional moisture to reach her sock. She walked anyway because walking was free, and buses cost money, and saving 50 cents today might mean being able to buy Zoe an apple tomorrow. The neighborhood changed as she moved west, abandoned buildings giving way to struggling businesses, giving way to the slightly less desperate commercial strip where the diner operated. Rosie's occupied a corner lot with large windows that faced the street, the kind of classic American diner that existed in every city, serving the same menu, employing the same mix of people who needed work and could not find anything better. The owner was a Greek man named Constantine, who went by Charlie and ran the place with the wary efficiency of someone who had long since stopped dreaming about anything beyond breaking even. Jordan liked working there well enough, or at least did not hate it, which amounted to the same thing in the economy of jobs available to people with her qualifications. Her shift did not officially start until 3:30, but she always arrived early, grabbed a cup of coffee from the pot in the back, and sat in the farthest booth for 20 minutes just breathing. The coffee was free for employees, bitter and burnt, and the only thing she would consume that resembled a meal until her break 6 hours from now. She cradled the mug between her palms, letting the warmth seep into her fingers, and stared out the window at people passing on the sidewalk. They looked purposeful, like they had places to be and resources to get there, and Jordan wondered what that felt like to move through the world without constantly calculating the cost of each decision. Linda had followed her here, the older woman's presence announced by the smell of cigarette smoke that clung to her coat. She slid into the booth across from Jordan without asking permission, the kind of casual intimacy that came from spending 40 hours a week together in close quarters. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who understood exhaustion in their bones and did not need to explain it to each other. "You worked yourself to death," Linda finally said, her voice carrying the rasp of 3 decades smoking Marlboro Reds. "You keep this pace up, you'll collapse." Jordan wrapped her fingers tighter around the coffee mug. "I don't have a choice. Bills don't pay themselves." "I know, honey, but you can't help Zoe if you end up in the hospital, can you?" The logic was sound maddeningly so, and Jordan had no response beyond the reality that slowing down was not an option available to her. The evening shift started with the usual dinner rush, families and truckers, and the occasional group of teenagers who ordered fries and stayed too long without spending enough. Jordan moved through her section with practiced efficiency, taking orders and delivering plates and refilling coffee cups with a smile that had become part of her uniform. Her feet screamed inside the damaged shoes, but she ignored them the way she ignored most physical discomfort, treating pain like background noise that could be acknowledged later when there was time. By 10 o'clock, the dinner crowd had thinned to a few stragglers nursing cups of coffee and avoiding going home to whatever waited for them there. Jordan counted her tips during a lull, laying the crumpled bills and scattered coins on the backroom table. $23 in paper money, mostly ones with a few fives mixed in. The coins added up to another 74 cents. $23.74. She needed to keep the 74 cents for tomorrow's bus fare, which left 23 even. Added to the $7 from earlier, she now had $30 total. She tucked 23 away in the front pocket of her purse earmarked for rent. The remaining 7 went into her wallet, a different compartment to prevent confusion. $7 until Friday. She could make it work. She always made it work. The math was brutal but simple. She just had to be more careful, more disciplined, more willing to go without than she already was. 11 o'clock arrived, and with it the end of her shift. Jordan clocked out, said goodbye to Linda, who was covering the late-night hours, and stepped out into the November darkness. The temperature had dropped while she worked, cold enough now that she could see her breath hanging in small clouds before dissipating into nothing. She pulled her jacket tighter, knowing it would do little good but performing the gesture anyway, and began the 2.5-mile walk home. The streets were quiet at this hour, most businesses closed. Foot traffic reduced to people like her, who had no choice but to move through the city after dark. Jordan kept her head up and her keys between her fingers, the kind of defensive posture women learned early and maintained forever. She had been walking this route for 3 weeks now, since the car broke down, and knew which blocks were safe and which required extra vigilance. Tonight she decided to cut through the Shell station parking lot on East Jefferson, partly because it shaved 4 minutes off her walk time, and partly because the restroom there had better lighting than most gas stations, and she needed to stop. The station looked half abandoned. At 11:15, fluorescent lights flickering over empty gas pumps, the convenience store glowing like a beacon of commercial desolation. Jordan pushed through the glass door, nodded to the attendant behind the counter, who barely looked up from his phone, and made her way to the single restroom at the back. It was cleaner than she expected, which said more about her expectations than the actual state of cleanliness. She used the facilities, quickly washed her hands with the pink industrial soap, and checked her reflection in the mirror. The same tired woman stared back, eyes hollow-faced, drawn, a person who had aged 5 years for everyone that passed. She pushed back out into the parking lot, and that was when everything changed. That was when she heard the sound that would alter the trajectory of her life in ways she could not begin to imagine. A man gasping, choking, the desperate animal sound of someone whose body was betraying them. Jordan stopped walking, every instinct she possessed, suddenly alert and focused on identifying the threat. The source revealed itself near the edge of the parking lot under one of the flickering lights. A massive man, easily 6'3" and 250 pounds, with a gray beard and arms covered in tattoos that disappeared into the sleeves of a black leather vest. The vest bore patches Jordan recognized from television and news reports, images she associated with danger and violence and criminality. Hell's Angels. The skull logo glared at her from the man's back, defiant and menacing even in the dim light. He leaned against a chrome Harley-Davidson motorcycle, one hand pressed to his chest, his face twisted in agony. Jordan took a step backward, preparing to walk away quickly before the situation involved her. She had Zoe to think about, responsibilities that trumped whatever was happening to this stranger. Getting involved with gang members with people who wore their violence on their sleeves was the kind of decision that ended badly for everyone. The gas station attendant appeared in the doorway, a white guy in his 30s wearing a name tag that read Brad. He saw the scene, saw Jordan standing there, and his voice cut across the parking lot with the sharp authority of someone used to dealing with trouble. Lady, don't. Those Hells Angels are nothing but trouble. Walk away right now. The man stumbled, his legs giving out beneath him, and dropped to one knee. His breathing came in short, desperate bursts, each inhale a battle he was losing. Jordan stood frozen, caught between self-preservation and something older and more insistent that pulled at her from the place where her grandmother's voice still lived. Then the man collapsed completely flat on his back against the pavement and his chest stopped moving. No rise and fall, no breath, just the terrible stillness of a body shutting down. The memory hit Jordan like physical force, dragging her backward 15 years to another city sidewalk where another person had collapsed while strangers stepped around them like they were an obstacle instead of a human being. Her grandmother, the woman who had raised her when her own mother could not, lying there with her face pressed against dirty concrete. A stroke, the doctors said later, massive and catastrophic. But by the time someone finally called for help, by the time the ambulance arrived and the paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher, it was too late. Brain damage too extensive. Jordan had been 13 years old sitting in algebra class when the principal came to pull her out. She never forgot the look on the woman's face, the particular expression adults wore when they had to tell a child something that would break their world apart. The man on the pavement was not her grandmother, but the sound he had made, that desperate gasping, was exactly the same. And the choice Jordan faced now was the same choice dozens of strangers had faced that day 15 years ago. Walk away and let someone else deal with it. Assume someone else would help. Tell yourself it was not your problem, not your responsibility, not worth the risk. That path was easy, safe, rational. Jordan ran toward the dying man instead, every rational thought in her brain screaming at her to stop. She dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the cold pavement that bit through her jeans, and grabbed his shoulder. Sir, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open just barely, the whites visible and terrifying in their blankness. His lips moved, trying to form words, but only a wheeze emerged. Jordan leaned closer, her ear near his mouth, straining to understand her. Heart, meds, forgot. The words were barely audible, crushed beneath the weight of his failing body. Jordan pulled out her phone with shaking hands, checking the screen. 1 bar of signal, 8% battery. She dialed 911, pressed the phone to her ear, and listened to it ring. Once, twice. The call dropped, the screen going black. Damn it, she tried again. Same result, the signal too weak, or the phone too old, or some combination of technological failure that meant help was not coming through that avenue. She looked up at the gas station. Brad still stood in the doorway, phone in his hand, but making no move to use it. His expression conveyed everything she needed to know about his willingness to help. An older man emerged from the store, white guy, maybe 60, wearing a trucker's cap and carrying a bag of chips. He saw the scene, Jordan kneeling beside the collapsed biker, and shook his head. The trucker walked over slowly, his boots scraping against the pavement. Miss, listen to me. Don't get involved. People like that, they're dangerous. You've got a kid to think about, don't you? I can tell. Just walk away while you still can. Jordan pulled her arm back when he reached out to touch her. A man is dying. The words came out flat, stripped of emotion, just statement of observable fact. The trucker shook his head, again muttered something under his breath that included the word crazy, and walked to his car. He drove off without looking back, taillights disappearing into the night, leaving Jordan alone with her choice. She stood, ran back toward the gas station, and burst through the door, hard enough to make Brad jump. Call an ambulance right now. He's dying out there. Brad rolled his eyes, the particular expression of someone who had seen too much drama and stopped caring about most of it. But he picked up the phone behind the counter, dialed, spoke to someone Jordan could not hear. She did not wait for him to finish. She scanned the shelves behind the counter until she spotted what she needed. Aspirin, water. She grabbed a small bottle of each and ran back to the counter, slamming them down. How much? $6.50. Jordan pulled the $7 from her wallet, Maya's breakfast money, and her own survival fund for the next 3 days. The bills were crumpled soft from being folded and unfolded countless times, evidence of their journey through her hands. She pushed them across the counter. Brad rang her up, handed her $1.50 in change coins that felt heavy with the weight of what they represented. Jordan did not wait for a receipt. She ran. The man was still on the ground, still not breathing, his face gray in the artificial light. Jordan twisted the cap off the aspirin bottle, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline, and shook 2 tablets into her palm. She opened the water, knelt beside him again, and forced her voice to stay calm, even though nothing about this situation was calm. "Hey, look at me. I need you to chew these. Can you do that for me?" His eyes found hers, consciousness flickering like a candle in wind. She placed the tablets on his tongue, watched him chew slowly, his face contorting with effort. She held the water bottle to his lips, and he managed a small sip, then another, the liquid helping him swallow. Jordan's hand found his shoulder, squeezing gently, trying to communicate through touch, what words could not convey in this moment. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. Stay right here with me." His hand reached up and grabbed hers, the grip weak but present. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What's your name, Jordan?" "Jordan Hayes. Jordan." He coughed, his whole body shaking with the effort. "You saved my life, not yet, but I'm trying." The words felt inadequate, insufficient to the moment, but they were all she had. In the distance, sirens began their wailing approach, the sound growing louder with each passing second. Then another motorcycle roared into the parking lot, engine noise shattering the relative quiet, and a younger man jumped off before the bike fully stopped. He was maybe 32, also wearing a Hells Angels vest, and he ran toward them with panic written across his face. "Ray. Oh my God, Ray!" He dropped to his knees on the other side of the collapsed man, his hands hovering like he wanted to help but did not know how. His eyes found Jordan's face, and something in his expression shifted from panic to shock to something else entirely. Some emotion she could not name but recognized as profound. "You helped him." The question came out like he was witnessing something impossible, some violation of natural law that should not exist. He needed help. Jordan said it simply, stripping away everything except the basic, observable truth of the situation. The younger man stared at her like she had just performed a miracle instead of the bare minimum of human decency. "Most people cross the street when they see us. Hell, most people would have let him die." Jordan did not respond because she had no response, no explanation beyond the fact that she could not walk away from someone who was dying, regardless of what patches they wore or what gang they belonged to. She kept her hand on Ray's shoulder until the ambulance pulled into the lot, red and white lights painting the scene in alternating colors that made everything feel surreal and urgent simultaneously. The paramedics rushed over with their equipment and practiced movements, taking over with the smooth efficiency of people who did this every day. One of them, a black woman in her 40s, looked at Jordan while her partner worked on Ray. "Did you give him aspirin?" "Yes, 2 tablets, maybe 3 minutes ago." The paramedic nodded, something in her expression shifting toward approval. "Smart move. You probably just saved his life. Heart attack patients need aspirin fast. Every second counts." They loaded Ray onto the stretcher with the careful coordination of a team that had performed this exact sequence hundreds of times. He reached out and grabbed Jordan's wrist one more time, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Tell them Big Ray sent you." She had no idea what that meant, could not begin to interpret the message, but she nodded anyway because he clearly needed her to understand. The younger man stood as the ambulance doors closed, turning to Jordan with an expression that mixed gratitude and disbelief in equal measure. He pulled a business card from his wallet, plain white with just a phone number and a small logo of a crown with wings. "My name's Dante. Ray's going to want to thank you. Please call this number tomorrow." Jordan took the card, her hands still shaking from adrenaline crash. "Who is he?" The question felt important, like knowing the answer might explain why this moment felt so weighted with significance beyond the obvious fact of saving someone's life. Dante smiled, but there was something heavy in it, something that suggested layers of meaning Jordan could not access. Someone important, someone who doesn't forget kindness. The ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring again, and Brad emerged from the gas station to stand in the doorway with his arms crossed. He shook his head at Jordan with an expression that clearly said she had made a terrible mistake. "Those guys are nothing but trouble. You just don't know it yet." Jordan stood alone in the parking lot with $1.50 in her pocket and no idea what she had just done beyond the obvious. She had saved a man's life, used her last $7, Maya's breakfast money, everything she had to her name. And for what? A business card and the thanks of a gang member who would probably never think about her again after tonight. The practical part of her brain, the part that had been trained by 3 years of grinding poverty, screamed that she had just made the worst possible decision. But another part, the part that sounded like her grandmother, felt oddly at peace with the choice regardless of its cost. She walked home in the darkness, the 2.5 miles stretching longer than usual, because exhaustion had finally caught up with her. The business card sat in her pocket next to her phone, both items feeling heavier than they should. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, looking for places where she could have made different choices, could have protected herself better, could have walked away. But she kept coming back to Ray's face, that terrible gray color, his chest not moving. If she had walked away, he would be dead. That was the simple truth. And she did not know how to regret preventing someone's death, regardless of who they were or what they had done. By the time she reached her apartment building, it was nearly 1 in the morning. Mrs. Henderson had fallen asleep on Jordan's couch with Zoe curled up beside her, both of them breathing softly in the dim light from the kitchen. Jordan gently shook the older woman awake, whispered her thanks, and walked her to the door. Then she carefully lifted Zoe, carrying her daughter to bed with movements perfected by 3 years of practice. The girl stirred slightly, consciousness surfacing just enough to recognize her mother's presence. "Mommy, shh, go back to sleep, baby. I've got you. Love you, Mommy." The words came out slurred with exhaustion, already halfway back to dreams. "Love you too, baby girl. More than anything in this world." Jordan tucked the blanket around Zoe's small body, kissed her forehead, and stood there for a long moment, just watching her daughter sleep. This was why she worked 2 jobs, why she walked miles in broken shoes, why she went hungry so Zoe could eat. Everything made sense when she looked at this sleeping child who trusted her completely to keep the world at bay. She walked back to the kitchen and sat at the wobbly table, pulling the business card from her pocket to examine it under the overhead light. The crown with Wings logo looked professionally designed, not the kind of thing she associated with criminal organizations. She turned it over, finding nothing on the back except the smooth white cardstock. Who were these people? What did Big Ray want from her? The questions spun through her tired brain without landing on anything resembling answers. The $1.50 she had left sat on the table beside her wallet coins and a single bill that represented her entire net worth until Friday. Tomorrow Zoe would wake up hungry, and Jordan would have to explain that breakfast was crackers and water because Mama had spent their food money on a stranger. The thought made her throat tight with guilt and fear, and the particular desperation of knowing she had made a choice that might have consequences she could not afford. But she had also saved someone's life. That had to count for something, even if she could not yet see what. Jordan pulled out her notebook, the small journal she kept beside her bed, and opened to a blank page. Every night, no matter what happened, she wrote 3 things she was grateful for. Tonight she wrote, 1, Zoe is healthy and safe. 2, I helped someone who needed it. 3, tomorrow is a new day and anything is possible. She closed the journal, set the business card on the nightstand, and lay down on her bed without bothering to change out of her work clothes. Exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, but her mind kept circling back to the parking lot, to Ray's face, to Dante's expression of disbelief. She had done the right thing. She was certain of that much. But right and smart were not always the same thing, and she would not know which one tonight had been until tomorrow revealed the consequences of her choice. Across town in a hospital room, Ray was telling Dante to gather everyone. Jordan did not know this yet. Did not know her name was being spoken in rooms she had never seen by people she had never met. Did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could not begin to imagine. All she knew was that she had $7 had acted from her heart instead of her head, and tomorrow she would have to face whatever came next with the same determination she faced everything. 1 foot in front of the other, 1 day at a time. Whatever happened, she would handle it because that was what mothers did when they had no other choice. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, unaware that morning would bring thunder in the form of 100 motorcycles rolling down her street. Jordan's alarm screamed at 5 in the morning, but this time she woke with a different weight pressing against her chest. Not exhaustion alone, though, that remained, but the specific anxiety of knowing she had $1.50 to her name and a 6-year-old daughter who would wake up hungry in an hour. She lay there for exactly 3 seconds before forcing herself upright, her body protesting every movement after yesterday's endless walking. The apartment felt colder than usual, the radiator clanking but producing almost no heat, and she pulled on a sweatshirt over her work clothes from the night before because doing laundry cost quarters she no longer had. The kitchen cabinet opened to reveal exactly what she expected. One banana turning brown at the stem, a handful of crackers left in a sleeve from a package she had bought 2 weeks ago, half a cup of milk that smelled fine but would not be enough for cereal even if they had cereal. Jordan arranged the crackers on a plate in a pattern that made them look more abundant than they were, split the banana down the middle, and poured the milk into Zoe's cup. For herself, nothing. Her stomach had stopped complaining about food 2 days ago, resigned to whatever scraps came its way. Zoe emerged from the bedroom rubbing her eyes, the inhaler clutched in one small hand because the girl had learned to bring it everywhere after the last attack scared them both. Her pajamas hung loose on a frame that should have carried more weight, evidence of months where calories were carefully rationed and sometimes insufficient. She climbed into the wobbly chair and looked at her breakfast with a particular expression of a child who had learned not to ask for more. "Morning, Mama. What's this special breakfast?" "Today, baby, crackers and banana." Your favorite. The lie came easily, now worn smooth by repetition, and Zoe accepted it because 6-year-olds believe their mothers even when the evidence suggested otherwise. "Where's yours?" The question arrived right on schedule, inevitable as the sunrise, and Jordan deployed the same response she had used for 3 years. "Already ate. I'm good. You go ahead and finish every bite." Jordan sat across from her daughter watching her eat, trying not to think about the $7 she had spent last night, or what it meant that Mrs. Henderson would be knocking on the door any minute, expecting the $20 for this week's childcare that Jordan no longer had. The mathematics of poverty allowed no room for compassion toward strangers, no budget line for saving lives. Every dollar served a specific purpose, and deviation from the plan meant something essential would go unfunded. She had deviated spectacularly, and today she would begin paying the price. The knock came at 7:15, earlier than expected, and Jordan felt her stomach drop before she even opened the door. But instead of Mrs. Henderson, she found Patricia Freeman standing in the hallway. Mrs. Freeman was 62, black church-going, and had lived in this building longer than Jordan had been alive. She wore a bathrobe over her nightgown and an expression that mixed concern with something harder, something that looked like disappointment carved into the lines around her mouth. "Jordan, baby, we need to talk." The words came out heavy, weighted with judgment that had not yet been fully articulated, but hovered close enough to taste. "Good morning, Mrs. Freeman. Is everything okay?" Jordan kept her voice level, even as her pulse accelerated, some instinct warning her that this conversation would not end well. The older woman stepped closer, lowering her voice though no one else occupied the hallway. "I heard you helped one of those Hell's Angels last night, one of those biker thugs, down at the gas station." Jordan's blood turned cold. How did anyone know already? She had walked home alone, spoken to no one, assumed the incident would disappear into the vast catalog of things that happened in cities without consequence or notice. "He was having a heart attack, Mrs. Freeman. I had to help. Child, those Hell's Angels are criminals." Mrs. Freeman's voice rose slightly, passion overriding her attempt at a discretion. "Drugs, violence, all kinds of mess. What were you thinking? You got Zoe to think about. He was a human being who needed help." Jordan heard her own voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "That's all I saw. Just a person dying on the ground." Mrs. Freeman shook her head, the gesture containing decades of accumulated wisdom about what happened to people who made foolish choices. "Your kindness is going to get you hurt one day. Mark my words, you can't save everybody, and trying just puts you and that baby in danger." She turned and walked back to her own apartment, leaving Jordan standing in the doorway with her hands shaking and her mind racing through implications she had not considered in the parking lot last night. If Mrs. Freeman knew, others would know. The neighborhood would know. Everyone would have an opinion about what Jordan should have done, and most of those opinions would involve minding her own business and protecting her daughter above all else. No one would understand. No one would see it the way she saw it. And maybe they were right. Maybe she had endangered Zoe for a stranger who would forget her name before the week ended. She closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the wood press cold against her back. Zoe appeared in the kitchen doorway, her small face creased with worry. "Mama, who was that? Why did she sound angry?" "Just a neighbor, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." Jordan forced brightness into her voice, performing normalcy for her daughter's benefit. Finish your breakfast. We need to get you ready for school. At the laundromat, Linda noticed something was wrong before Jordan even clocked in. The older woman took one look at her face and steered her toward the break room, away from the industrial washers and the manager's line of sight. They sat at the small table scarred with coffee rings and cigarette burns from employees who had worked here long before either of them arrived. What happened? Linda's voice carried the particular gentleness of someone who had seen hard things and knew how to recognize them in others. Jordan told her everything. The gas station, the dying man using her last $7 on aspirin and water, walking home with $1.50 to her name. The business card. Mrs. Freeman's warning this morning. By the time she finished, Linda's eyes had gone wide with a mixture of admiration and concern that seemed to war for dominance on her face. Girl, you helped a Hell's Angel. The statement landed between them like something physical requiring acknowledgement. I helped a man having a heart attack. Jordan corrected gently, not because the distinction mattered legally, but because it mattered to her understanding of what she had done. The patches on his vest didn't change the fact that he was dying. But what if Mrs. Freeman's right? What if you brought trouble to your door? Linda's concern was genuine, born from the same place of protective instinct that had made Mrs. Freeman speak up despite knowing it would hurt. Then I'll deal with it. Jordan heard the words come out of her mouth with more confidence than she felt. But I couldn't leave him there, Linda. I couldn't walk past someone dying. That's not who I am. That's not who my grandmother raised me to be. Linda reached across the table and squeezed her hand, nicotine-stained fingers warm and solid. Baby, you did what your heart told you to do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that. But be careful. People like that, they live different than us. Getting mixed up in their world, even accidentally, that can go sideways fast. The shift stretched long, each hour marked by Jordan's growing awareness of her empty stomach and the hole in her shoe that let in every piece of grit from the laundromat floor. During her break, she sat in the employee area and stared at the business card Dante had given her. The Crown with Wings logo seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Or maybe that was just her imagination projecting significance onto plain cardstock. She pulled out her phone, typed a text message to the number on the card, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. What would she even say? Thank you for existing so I could bankrupt myself saving you. Finally, she settled on something simple. Hi, this is Jordan Hayes. Dante gave me this number. She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. Her phone felt heavy in her hand, laden with the weight of consequences she had set in motion without understanding their full scope. Within seconds it rang. Unknown number. Jordan stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the answer button, then let it go to voicemail. She was not ready, did not know what to say, needed time to think through what any of this meant. The voicemail notification appeared. She played it with the volume low. Dante's voice emerged from the speaker, earnest and urgent in a way that suggested he had been waiting for her to contact him. Jordan, it's Dante. Ray wants to meet you today. Can you come to Murphy's Diner on Woodward at 3 p.m.? It's important. Please. Jordan deleted the voicemail and sat staring at the wall. 3 p.m. was possible. Her shift here ended at 3. She could walk to Woodward Street, probably make it by 3:30. But should she meeting Ray meant acknowledging that last night had not been a self-contained incident, that it had consequences and expectations attached to it. She did not want expectations. She wanted to survive until Friday's paycheck, wanted to feed her daughter, wanted her life to return to the normal grinding poverty that was at least predictable in its awfulness. But Ray had asked for her specifically, by name. That had to mean something, though Jordan could not yet parse what. She sent a text back. I can be there by 3:30. The response came immediately. Perfect. Thank you, Jordan. The walk from Sudsy's Laundry to Woodward Street took 43 minutes, each step a small, sharp reminder of the hole in her shoe. Jordan's feet hurt before she made it 3 blocks, and by the time she reached the diner, she was limping slightly, favoring her right side to reduce pressure on the damaged sole. She turned the corner onto Woodward and stopped walking entirely, her breath catching in her throat hard enough to hurt. Motorcycles, dozens of them, maybe more than dozens. Chrome gleaming under the afternoon sun, parked in perfect rows that suggested military precision rather than casual gathering. Black leather vests everywhere, men and women standing in small groups, arms crossed, faces serious. Jordan felt ice spread through her chest. Mrs. Freeman had been right. She had made a terrible mistake. She should turn around right now, go home, pretend she had never received Dante's call. But her feet moved forward, despite her brain screaming at them to stop, some combination of curiosity and commitment pulling her toward the diner against her better judgment. The bikers lined the sidewalk, big men with gray beards and women whose eyes tracked Jordan's approach with expressions she could not read. They were not loud or threatening, but their presence felt massive, undeniable, like weather systems that could not be argued with. As Jordan walked past, something impossible happened. One by one they nodded to her, small gestures of acknowledgement that felt weighted with meaning she did not understand. An older man with a white beard tipped an imaginary hat. A woman with facial tattoos smiled. Jordan's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She reached the door, took a breath that did nothing to calm her nerves, and walked inside. Every booth and table was filled with bikers. The diner was dead silent, conversations suspended, and every single person turned to look at her. Jordan felt their eyes like physical pressure against her skin. Dante appeared from the back of the room, moving through the crowd with easy familiarity, and his face broke into a genuine smile when he saw her. "Jordan, thank you for coming. I know this must be overwhelming." His voice carried warmth that suggested he understood exactly how terrifying this was for someone standing where she stood. As they walked through the diner toward the back corner, something incredible happened. The bikers stood up, one by one, row after row. As Jordan passed each table, the occupants rose to their feet in a wave of movement that felt choreographed but could not have been planned. It was respectful, almost reverent, and Jordan had no framework for understanding what it meant. She had grown up learning to fear these people to cross the street when she saw their vests, to teach her daughter to avoid them entirely. But here they were standing for her, a black single mother in discount store clothes and broken shoes who had spent her last $7 on one of their own. Dante led her to a corner booth where Ray sat, looking significantly better than he had 12 hours ago in the parking lot. Color had returned to his face, though he moved carefully, wincing as he adjusted his position to face her. His eyes found hers and held them with an intensity that made Jordan want to look away, but somehow could not. "Jordan Hayes, please sit." His voice was deep, gravelly, exactly what she would have expected from a man of his size, but carrying something else beneath it. Vulnerability, maybe, or gratitude, so profound it had changed the timbre of his speech. Jordan slid into the booth across from him, her hands folded on the table to hide their shaking. "How are you feeling?" The question felt inadequate. Small talk when the situation demanded something more substantial, but she did not know what else to say. "Doctor said if you hadn't acted fast, I'd be dead." Ray leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Massive heart attack. The aspirin you gave me kept the clotting under control just long enough for the ambulance to arrive. EMT told me another 5 minutes and I'd have been gone. So to answer your question, I'm feeling grateful. More grateful than I've been in 20 years. I'm just glad you're okay." Jordan meant it, completely felt relief wash through her at the confirmation that her choice had mattered, that the $7 had purchased something irreplaceable. Ray studied her face for a long moment, his expression shifting through emotions Jordan could not name. "Dante told me everything. You wouldn't take money from him. You've got a daughter, 2 jobs, and you used your last $8 to save my life." "7," Jordan corrected quietly. It was $7. The distinction felt important even though she could not articulate why. $7, Ray repeated it like a prayer, like something holy that deserved reverence. "And now you've got what left, $1.50, until Friday." She said it without shame because shame served no purpose and would not change the mathematics of her situation. Ray's jaw tightened, something working behind his eyes. He pulled a photograph from his pocket and slid it across the table. The image showed a younger Ray standing beside a woman who had to be his wife, both of them smiling at the camera with the particular joy of people who did not yet know what grief would do to them. Between them stood a little girl, maybe 7 years old, with bright eyes and a smile so huge it seemed to encompass her entire face. "That's my daughter. Her name was Emma." Ray's voice caught on the past tense, 3 decades of loss condensed into a single syllable that broke halfway through. Jordan felt her throat tighten, her hands moving unconsciously to cover her mouth. "Was leukemia. She was 7 years old. The treatment she needed, experimental therapy, they weren't covered by insurance. We tried fundraising, sold everything we had, took out loans we knew we couldn't pay back. But we couldn't raise the money fast enough. By the time we got what we needed, the cancer had progressed too far. She died in my arms at Detroit Children's Hospital on a Tuesday morning 20 years ago. Ray's voice stayed level, practiced from years of telling this story, but his eyes glistened with tears he refused to let fall. Jordan's vision blurred her own tears coming fast and hot. I'm so sorry. The words were completely inadequate, meaningless in the face of such loss, but they were all she had. After Emma died, I made a promise. Ray continued, his voice growing stronger as he moved through the narrative toward its purpose. I promised that anyone who showed real kindness, especially when they had nothing themselves, I would help them. It's what Emma would have wanted. She was kind, you know. Even when she was dying, even when the pain was so bad, she couldn't sleep, she worried about other kids in the hospital. Asked the nurses if they were taking care of everyone. That's who she was. And I wasn't going to let her death be meaningless. So I started Lily's Legacy. Lily's Legacy, Jordan repeated the name, tasting its syllables. Nonprofit I founded 20 years ago. We help struggling families. Medical bills, housing emergencies, food insecurity, education costs. We've helped over 3,000 families across Michigan and 5 surrounding states. Ray pulled out a brochure from inside his vest, sliding it across the table. The crown with wings logo adorned the front above text that read, Lily's Legacy, where kindness lives. Jordan opened the brochure with shaking hands. Inside were photographs of families, testimonials, a mission statement about breaking cycles of poverty through direct intervention. The Hells Angels patches make sense now, Ray said, watching her read. Most people see the vests and assume we're criminals. And yeah, some chapters still are. But my chapter, we left that life behind 2 decades ago. We're a brotherhood dedicated to protecting people who can't protect themselves. Lily's Legacy is how we do that. Jordan felt the world tilt sideways, her entire understanding of the previous 24 hours or reorganizing itself around this new information. These dangerous criminals were heroes. These people she had been taught to fear spent their time helping families like hers. The cognitive dissonance was profound, dizzying, requiring her to rebuild assumptions she had carried her entire adult life. Tomorrow morning, something's going to happen. Ray's voice pulled her back to the present, his expression serious. Don't be scared when you see us. Just trust me. Can you do that? What do you mean? What's going to happen? Jordan's pulse accelerated, fear creeping back in despite the revelation about Lily's legacy. Ray smiled, the expression transforming his face into something warm and almost playful. You'll see. But Jordan, I need you to understand something. You saved my life when you had every reason to walk away, when other people did walk away. That kind of kindness is rare. That kind of courage is precious. And I'm going to make sure you and your daughter never have to choose between medicine and food again. Jordan opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her brain could not process what he was suggesting, could not reconcile the enormity of his implication with her lived reality of endless scarcity. Ray stood carefully, extending his hand across the table. She took it, his grip firm and warm, and somehow conveying more than the conversation had explicitly communicated. Tomorrow morning, Ray said again, trust me. The walk home took longer than usual because Jordan's mind spun through scenarios faster than her feet could carry her body. What did tomorrow morning mean? Why had Ray been so cryptic? What were 100 bikers going to do on her street? By the time she reached her building, the sun was setting and her anxiety had metastasized into something close to dread. Mrs. Freeman stood on her porch with Mr. James Carter, a 43-year-old man who lived 3 doors down and had never spoken to Jordan before today. That girl Sienna is mixed up with those bikers now. Mrs. Freeman's voice carried clearly across the evening air, and Jordan realized with sinking horror that she was the topic of neighborhood gossip. I told her no good would come of it, but she wouldn't listen. Hell's Angels on our street. Mr. Carter's voice rose with indignation. We got to do something. Can't have gang members rolling through here. I got kids. Jordan kept walking, head down, trying to reach her door before the conversation could pivot to include her directly. But Mrs. Freeman spotted her, and there was no escape. Jordan, you need to explain what's happening. People are scared. There's talk of bikers coming here tomorrow. Is that true? I don't know. Jordan said it honestly because she genuinely had no concrete information beyond Ray's cryptic promise. I helped someone who was dying. That's all. That's all. Mr. Carter stepped off his porch, moving toward Jordan with anger radiating from his posture. You brought a gang's attention to our neighborhood. You put all of us in danger because you couldn't mind your own business. A man was dying. Jordan repeated it for what felt like the 100th time, the words losing meaning through repetition. I couldn't just leave him there. Yes, you could have. Mr. Carter's face was red now, veins visible in his neck. That's exactly what you should have done. Let someone else deal with it. Let the cops handle it. But no, you had to play hero, and now we're all going to pay the price. Jordan felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She walked past Mr. Carter without responding, unlocked her door, and slipped inside before he could say anything else. She leaned against the closed door, sliding down until she sat on the floor and let the tears come. Maybe they were right. Maybe she had been selfish, had prioritized a stranger over her daughter's safety, had brought danger to people who had never asked to be involved in her choices. Zoe appeared from the bedroom, her small face creased with worry. Mama, why are you crying? Are you sad? Jordan pulled herself together, wiped her eyes, and opened her arms. Zoe ran into them, and Jordan held her daughter tight enough to hurt. No, baby, I'm not sad, just tired. Long day at work. That night, Jordan lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Zoe slept beside her. The apartment felt oppressive walls pressing in the weight of judgment from her neighbors, making it hard to breathe. She had done the right thing. She was certain of that much. But right and safe were not always the same thing, and she would not know which one tonight had been until tomorrow revealed the consequences of Ray's mysterious promise. Sleep came late and brought dreams of motorcycles and judgment, and her grandmother's voice saying kindness costs nothing, baby, over and over, like a mantra that might or might not be true. Jordan woke to a sound like thunder. Deep rumbling, shaking the windows in their frames hard enough that she thought at first an earthquake was somehow hitting Detroit. But as consciousness returned fully, she recognized it. Engines, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The mechanical roar of motorcycles idling in perfect synchronization. She rushed to the window and looked out, and her breath stopped entirely. Her street was lined with motorcycles as far as she could see in both directions. Chrome gleaming in the morning sun, black vest bikers standing in perfect formation like an army preparing for deployment. A trailer truck was parked in the middle of the street, massive and incongruous among the residential buildings. Ray stood beside it, easy to spot because of his size and the way other bikers deferred to him. Dante was there too, along with faces Jordan recognized from the diner yesterday. At least 100 people, possibly more, all of them waiting for something. Oh my God, Jordan whispered the words to no one, her hands pressed against the glass. Mommy, why are there so many motorcycles? Zoe's voice came from behind her, small and scared, and Jordan turned to see her daughter standing in the doorway with wide eyes. I don't know, baby, but we're going to find out. Jordan threw on clothes, grabbed Zoe's hand, and rushed outside before she could lose her nerve. The entire neighborhood had emerged from their homes, but unlike Jordan, they were terrified. Windows slammed shut, doors locked. Parents pulled children inside. Mrs. Freeman stood on her porch with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking urgently to what Jordan assumed was 911. Mr. Carter ran toward Jordan, his face red with fury that had been building since last night. Sienna, what did you do? Why are they here? His voice carried across the street, drawing the attention of everyone present. You brought a gang to our street. Our kids live here. What were you thinking? Other neighbors gathered behind him, their voices rising in a chorus of accusation and fear. You put us all in danger. This is your fault. We should call the police. Jordan felt the crowd pressing closer, felt their anger like heat radiating from their bodies. Zoe started crying, clinging to Jordan's leg, and that broke something inside her. Her daughter was scared because Jordan had made choices that brought consequences she had not anticipated. Dante stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace that looked practiced. Folks, we're not here to cause trouble. Please, just listen. Then why are you here, Mr. Carter? Shouted back, unwilling to be calmed. Why is there a gang on our street? We're here to help one of your own. Dante's voice carried authority despite his youth, something in his posture commanding attention. Jordan saved a life 2 nights ago. Now we're here to save hers. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of confusion spreading through the crowd. Mrs. Freeman lowered her phone, her anger momentarily displaced by uncertainty. What do you mean? Ray walked forward, then moving slowly because his body still ached from the heart attack. The crowd parted without conscious decision, people stepping back from this man who radiated power despite his recent brush with death. He stopped 10 feet from Jordan, his eyes finding hers, and something passed between them that felt like understanding. My name is Raymond Morrison. Ray's voice was not loud, but it carried each word landing with weight that demanded attention. I understand you're scared. You see the jackets, the bikes, all these people you don't know. You think danger. You think gang. You think your families are at risk. He gestured toward Jordan, who stood frozen with Zoe pressed against her legs. But this woman didn't see any of that. 2 nights ago, she found me dying in a gas station parking lot. Heart attack. I was dying, and she was the only person around. The gas station attendant told her to walk away. An old man told her people like me were dangerous. She had every reason to keep walking. She had her daughter to think about. She had her own problems to deal with. The crowd was silent now, listening despite themselves. Ray continued, his voice growing stronger. She used her last $7, her daughter's breakfast money, everything she had to her name, bought aspirin and water, and knelt beside me on that cold pavement and saved my life. She didn't know who I was, didn't care, just saw a human being who needed help. That's the woman you're judging. That's the person you think made a mistake. Mrs. Freeman's hand moved to cover her mouth, her eyes glistening. Mr. Carter's face changed, anger draining away to be replaced by something that looked like shame. Ray turned to address the whole neighborhood now, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades telling versions of this story. I get it. I do. You judged us by our appearance. That's human nature. But Jordan Hayes looked past the surface and saw a man dying, and she acted from pure compassion. No expectation of reward, no thought for what it would cost her. That's rare. That's precious. And that's why we're here. He gestured to the trailer truck, and bikers began opening the back doors. Jordan watched in stunned silence as they started unloading. Furniture, appliances, boxes of food, clothing, school supplies. The items kept coming, pile after pile of goods that represented more wealth than Jordan had seen in her entire adult life. The neighbors watched too, their fear transforming slowly into confused wonder. Cole stepped forward with a microphone someone had produced from somewhere, his voice amplified now, so the whole street could hear. My name is Dante Williams. I'm a volunteer coordinator with Lily's Legacy, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping struggling families. We've been doing this work for 20 years. Over 3,000 families in Michigan and surrounding states. We raise money, pay medical bills, prevent evictions, provide food and clothing and education support. Wait. Mr. Carter stepped forward, his voice uncertain now. Lily's Legacy, you helped my cousin in Flint. Marcus Carter, veteran with PTSD. You paid for his therapy. Dante smiled, recognition lighting his face. Marcus is doing great now, works at the VA hospital, helps other vets navigate their benefits. We stay in touch. A woman in the crowd gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You paid for my son's heart surgery 3 years ago. Timothy Freeman, he's healthy now because of you. Another voice, an elderly man. You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure. The atmosphere shifted palpably, fear evaporating to be replaced by understanding and then gratitude. Mrs. Freeman walked toward Ray with tears streaming down her face. Lord, forgive me. I judged you all wrong. I told Jordan she was making a mistake. I was so sure you were dangerous, but you're angels. Ray's expression softened. We're not angels, ma'am. We're just people trying to do good in the world, trying to honor the memory of people we've lost by helping people who are still here. He turned back to Jordan, who stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was happening. You gave me a second chance at life. Let me give you one. He handed her an envelope, thick and official looking. Jordan opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a check, $30,000. Her vision blurred the numbers, refusing to resolve into anything that made sense. Below the check was a letter on official Lily's Legacy letterhead. Job offer for community outreach coordinator. Salary $54,000 annually. Full benefits, including health insurance for Jordan and her dependents. Start date 2 weeks from today. Jordan's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the pavement, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. This was not real. Could not be real. Things like this did not happen to people like her. Zoe knelt beside her, small hands touching her face. Mama, Mama, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby. Jordan managed to get the words out between sobs. These are happy tears. The neighborhood erupted in applause. People crying and cheering and rushing forward to embrace Jordan, to touch her, to be part of this moment that had transformed from fear into something like hope. Mrs. Freeman pulled Jordan into a hug so tight it hurt. Baby, you showed us how to be better. You showed us what kindness looks like. I'm so sorry I doubted you. Ray knelt beside Jordan, wincing at the movement. One more thing, he pulled out a car key, dangling it in front of her. We bought your Honda from the impound lot, had our mechanics fix it completely. New transmission, new tires, full tune-up. It's around the corner, waiting for you. Jordan looked up at him, face streaked with tears, unable to form words. Ray smiled, and for the first time she saw past the intimidating exterior to the man beneath who had spent 20 years trying to fill a hole left by his daughter's death. Why Jordan finally managed. Why all this? Because 20 years ago my daughter died because we didn't have enough money. Because the system failed us and I couldn't save her. Ray's voice broke, tears finally escaping to run down into his beard. I swore I'd never let that happen to another family. You saved my life with your last dollars, didn't hesitate, didn't ask for anything in return. That's who the world needs. That's who I need. I'm nobody special. Jordan whispered it, believing it completely. You're wrong, Ray said firmly. You're exactly who we've been looking for. The euphoria lasted exactly 1 week before the first crack appeared in Jordan's new reality. She had spent those 7 days in a daze moving furniture into her apartment with the help of neighbors who suddenly saw her as a hero instead of a burden, stocking her refrigerator with food that would actually last more than 2 days, watching Zoe's face light up at the new bed and desk and toys that transformed their cramped space into something resembling a real home. The check sat in her purse, not yet deposited, because some part of Jordan's brain refused to believe it was real that $30,000 existed with her name printed across the front. Then Terrence showed up. Jordan returned from her final shift at the laundromat, having given 2 weeks' notice that felt like parole from a life sentence, and found him sitting on the building's front steps. She recognized him instantly, despite 5 years of absence, the way trauma etches certain faces into permanent memory. He looked good, which made everything worse somehow. Clean clothes, new sneakers, the kind of grooming that suggested steady employment, or at least access to resources. His smile was the same one that had convinced her at 21 that he was different from other men, that he would stay, that they would build something together. Hey, Jordan, long time no see. His voice carried the casual warmth of someone who had not abandoned his daughter at 13 months old and disappeared with $2,400 that was supposed to pay for 3 months of rent. What are you doing here? Jordan kept her distance, keys gripped between her fingers in a defensive posture that had become second nature during her years walking Detroit streets alone. Can a man visit his baby mama? Terrence stood stretching like he had all the time in the world. Heard you came into some money, saw it on the news. Hell's Angels giving you gifts, fancy new job. I'm happy for you, baby, real happy. Don't call me that. Jordan's voice came out flat, stripped of emotion through sheer force of will. And Zoe's not here if that's who you're looking for. Actually, I'm here to see you. We need to talk about Zoe, about us, about how I can be part of my daughter's life again. His words sounded rehearsed, like he had practiced this speech in front of a mirror until it sounded sincere enough to pass casual inspection. There is no us. You left. You took my savings and disappeared for 5 years. Jordan felt old anger rising in her chest, hot and acidic. You don't get to come back now because I finally caught a break. I made mistakes. Terrence stepped closer, his expression shifting into something that was supposed to look like remorse but came across as calculation. I was young, stupid, scared. But I've changed. I got my life together. Now I want to be a real father to Zoe. She deserves that. She deserved it 5 years ago. Jordan tried to move past him toward the building entrance, but he shifted his weight to block her path. Not threatening exactly, but making clear that this conversation would end when he decided it ended. I'm trying here, Jordan. Don't make this difficult. His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that made the hairs on her neck stand up. I'm her father, legal father. I got rights. And if you don't want lawyers getting involved, maybe we should work something out between us. Like adults. Jordan pulled her arm back when he reached for it, her whole body tensing for fight or flight. Get out of my way, Terrence. Think about it. He stepped aside, finally hands raised in mock surrender. Think about what's best for Zoe. I'll be around. She pushed past him into the building, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key into her apartment door. Inside, she locked the deadbolt in the chain and slid down to sit on the floor trying to control her breathing. He wanted money. That was obvious. The question was how far he would go to get it and what damage he would do in the process. The answer came 2 weeks later in the form of Frank Delgado knocking on her door with a rental agreement in his hand. Her landlord had always been sleazy, the kind of man who let his eyes linger too long and made comments that walked the line between friendly and inappropriate. But he had been predictable, and predictability counted for something when you were barely surviving. Now he stood in her doorway with a smile that made her skin crawl. Jordan, heard the good news about your new job. Congratulations, really. You deserve it. Frank's voice oozed false warmth, every word carefully chosen to sound supportive, while conveying exactly the opposite. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. What can I do for you? Jordan did not invite him in, keeping her body blocking the entrance to her apartment. Well, with your improved financial situation, I'm going to need to adjust your rent. He held up the paper pointing to numbers that made Jordan's stomach drop. New rate effective next month, $1,400. What, you can't do that. We have a lease. Jordan's mind raced through the rental agreement she had signed 3 years ago, trying to remember the specific language about rent increases. Month to month, actually. Frank pulled out a copy of the agreement, his finger pointing to the relevant clause. See, either party can terminate with 30 days notice, and I can adjust rates at any time. New rent is $1,400. Take it or leave it. That's almost double what I'm paying now. Jordan felt panic rising in her chest, the familiar squeeze of poverty reasserting itself despite the money sitting in her bank account. That's market rate for someone with your income level. Frank shrugged the gesture, conveying exactly how much he cared about her situation. You can afford it now, or you can move. Up to you. He left her holding the new rental agreement, and Jordan stood in her doorway staring at the numbers until they blurred into abstract shapes. She had escaped one form of exploitation only to walk directly into another. The $30,000 that had seemed like infinite wealth a week ago suddenly looked finite, vulnerable to the endless line of people who would try to take a piece of it. The third blow landed on a Tuesday morning when Jordan answered a knock to find a woman with a clipboard and an expression of professional neutrality. The woman introduced herself as Vanessa Price from Child Protective Services, and Jordan felt the floor drop out from under her feet before Vanessa finished her second sentence. We received a report about Zoe's living conditions. Someone claimed you're involved with a criminal organization, that your recent income is from suspicious sources, that your daughter may be in an unsafe environment. I'm sure it's nothing, but I need to do a home inspection. May I come in? Jordan wanted to refuse, wanted to demand a warrant, wanted to scream that this was insane. But refusing a CPS investigator was the fastest way to make a situation worse. So she stepped aside and let Vanessa enter. The woman walked through the apartment, making notes, her face revealing nothing. She opened the refrigerator, checked the bedrooms, examined the new furniture with an expression that suggested she was calculating its value. This is all new. Vanessa gestured to the couch, the dining table, Zoe's bed visible through the bedroom door. Gifts from Lily's Legacy, the nonprofit I work for. Jordan heard her own voice defensive despite having nothing to defend. Gifts worth what, $15,000? That's unusual. Vanessa's pen scratched across her clipboard, each stroke feeling like an indictment. I saved someone's life. They were grateful. Jordan tried to keep her voice level, but anger was creeping in around the edges. Uh-huh. Vanessa closed her notebook, her expression never shifting from professional neutrality. Ms. Hayes, I'll need documentation. Pay stubs, tax records, proof of employment. And I'll be speaking with Zoe's school, her doctor, your neighbors. Standard procedure. She left, and Jordan collapsed onto her new couch, her mind spinning through implications that grew darker with each passing second. Someone had called CPS. Someone had filed a complaint designed to make her look like an unfit mother. And she had a terrible suspicion about who that someone was. The suspicion became certainty that evening when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop working with those thugs or you'll lose everything. This is your only warning. Jordan stared at the message until her vision blurred, then deleted it with shaking hands. Terrence was behind this, had to be. He had shown up demanding money she had refused, and now he was trying to force her hand by threatening the one thing she cared about more than her own survival. The realization brought clarity along with fear. This was not over. This was just beginning. The crisis accelerated 3 weeks later when Jordan was pulled from work by a call from Zoe's school. Her daughter was having trouble breathing, her inhaler was not helping, and they had called an ambulance as a precaution. Jordan ran the entire 2 miles to Children's Hospital, arriving just as they were wheeling Zoe into the emergency room. The girl's lips had a blue tinge that Jordan recognized from previous attacks, and the sound of her labored breathing cut through her mother like broken glass. Dr. Amelia Chen, a pediatrician Jordan had met once during a previous visit, emerged from the treatment room after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Zoe was stable, the doctor explained, but this had been a serious attack. Had there been unusual stress in Zoe's life recently, Jordan told her about the CPS investigation, about Terrence showing up, about the reporters who had started camping outside their building trying to get quotes about the Hells Angels story. Dr. Chen listened with a particular expression of medical professionals who had seen poverty's collateral damage too many times to be shocked by it. She ordered Zoe kept overnight for observation, and Jordan sat in the chair beside her daughter's hospital bed, watching monitors track vitals that had been critical an hour ago. Ray and Dante appeared in the doorway just after midnight, having somehow heard about the hospitalization through the mysterious network that seemed to connect everyone affiliated with Lily's legacy. Ray looked at Zoe sleeping peacefully now, thanks to medication and oxygen support, and something in his face crumbled. Jordan saw him transported backward 20 years to another hospital room, where another little girl fought for breath that would eventually stop coming. "How is she?" Ray's voice came out rough, stripped of its usual authority. "She's okay now. But Ray, this is too much." Jordan heard herself saying words she had not consciously decided to speak. The gifts, the attention, the people coming out of nowhere. My ex-boyfriend showed up demanding money. My landlord's doubling my rent. Stapes is investigating me. Someone sent me a threatening text. I think I made a mistake accepting all this. Ray sat heavily in the chair beside hers, Dante standing behind him with hands shoved in his pockets. "You didn't make a mistake, but I should have prepared you better. When good fortune comes, vultures circle. Let us help with the threats." How Jordan felt exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. "You can't fight my ex-boyfriend through the legal system. You can't stop CPS from investigating. You can't make people stop judging me. We have lawyers." Dante spoke up, his voice carrying quiet confidence. "Security resources. Connections. You're not alone in this, Jordan. That's what family means." The word landed between them, heavy with implications Jordan was not ready to examine. She had spent 5 years fighting alone, had built her identity around being the person who needed no one, because needing people only led to disappointment. But sitting in this hospital room watching her daughter breathe through tubes while 2 men who had been strangers 3 weeks ago offered to fight her battles, she felt something crack in the armor she had built around her heart. The court date arrived 6 weeks after Terrence first appeared on her doorstep. He had filed for joint custody, claiming that his newfound stability and desire to be involved in his daughter's life trumped 5 years of complete absence. His lawyer, expensive enough to suggest Terrence had found money somewhere, painted Jordan as an unstable woman who associated with criminal organizations and made poor financial decisions. Jordan's lawyer, provided by Lily's legacy, countered with documentation of every missed child support payment, every broken promise, every year Terrence had chosen to remain absent. Judge Patricia Reeves, a black woman in her early 60s who had presided over family court for 2 decades, listened to both sides with an expression that revealed nothing. Then she asked to speak with Zoe privately. Jordan waited outside the chambers for 15 minutes that felt like 15 years, her hands twisted together so tightly her knuckles went white. When Zoe emerged, she ran directly to Jordan and buried her face in her mother's stomach. "He scared me, Mama. I don't want to go with him." The words were muffled but clear enough, and Jordan felt rage surge through her veins, hot enough to burn. The judge called everyone back into the courtroom, and her face had shifted from neutral to something harder. "Mr. Hayes, your concern for your daughter rings hollow given your 5-year absence. This court finds no evidence of instability or child endangerment in Ms. Hayes's home. You will have supervised visitation rights only contingent upon completing parenting classes and paying back child support in full. Ms. Hayes retains sole custody. Case dismissed." The courtroom erupted with applause from the gallery where Mrs. Freeman and Linda and half of Jordan's neighborhood had gathered. Terrence stormed out, his face twisted with fury that promised this was not over, even if the legal battle was. Jordan sank into her chair, holding Zoe tight, and let tears come that were equal parts relief and exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, Ray was waiting with news that complicated the victory. They had a problem, he explained. The Iron Wolves, a rival motorcycle club that ran drugs and guns through Detroit's east side, had made threats about the Clark House Community Center, scheduled to break ground the following week. The construction site had been vandalized, equipment destroyed, spray paint messages, promising worse if the project continued. Why would they care about a community center? Jordan could not make the connection between charity work and gang violence. Territory, Dante answered when Ray seemed unable to find words. They see Lily's legacy as competition. We're building influence in neighborhoods they control through fear. That threatens their business model. Jordan felt the weight of consequences spreading beyond her own life, touching people who had never asked to be involved in her story. What are you going to do? Ray's expression went hard in a way that reminded Jordan these men had lived violent lives before they found redemption. Handle it the right way, no violence, no retaliation that would hurt the community. But they're going to learn that threatening our people has consequences. 3 days later, Ray met with Marcus Viper Stone, leader of the Iron Wolves, in a neutral location. Jordan was not present, but Ray told her about it afterward, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had won a chess match against a dangerous opponent. He had offered Viper a choice: walk away from Clark House and leave Jordan's neighborhood alone, or face federal prosecution based on 5 years of evidence Lily's legacy had been quietly compiling about the Iron Wolves' criminal operations. Was the evidence real? Jordan asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Real enough to convince him. Ray's smile was cold. Sometimes you bluff to protect people you love. And it worked. Viper agreed to leave Clark House alone. The groundbreaking ceremony happened on a Tuesday morning in October, 6 months after Jordan had spent her last $7 on a dying stranger. The vacant lot that had been an eyesore for 15 years was transformed into a construction site buzzing with workers and machinery. A banner stretched across the fence read, "Clark House, where kindness lives." Jordan stood with a ceremonial shovel, flanked by Ray and Dante and the mayor of Detroit, who had shown up for the photo opportunity, and tried to process how her life had become something that required mayors and television cameras. How does it feel to have a community center named after you? A reporter shoved a microphone toward her face, and Jordan felt her throat tighten with emotion she had been holding back all morning. It's not about me. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. It's about what happens when we choose kindness over fear, when we see people instead of stereotypes, when we remember that we're all connected and helping someone else helps all of us. The building rose slowly over the following months, steel and concrete, gradually taking the shape of something that would outlast everyone present at its creation. Jordan visited the site weekly, watching progress and trying to believe that this permanent structure bearing her name was not some fever dream her poverty-exhausted brain had hallucinated. The community rallied around the project, neighbors who had been terrified of Hell's Angels 6 months ago, now volunteering their time and skills to speed construction. Mrs. Freeman organized a food drive that collected enough supplies to stock the planned food bank for 3 months. Mr. Carter, whose initial hostility had transformed into fierce protective loyalty, coordinated with local businesses to donate computers for the technology lab. Linda quit the diner to work full-time as Clark House's kitchen manager, her decades of food service experience finally valued properly. The neighborhood was transforming itself through collective effort, and Jordan stood at the center watching it happen with a mixture of pride and terror at the responsibility she now carried. The grand opening arrived on a Saturday in April, exactly 1 year after that night at the gas station. The building gleamed in spring sunshine, 2 stories of glass and brick that looked like hope made tangible. Inside, the space held everything Ray had promised: a job training center, a medical clinic, a food bank, an after-school program, a computer lab, recreation rooms for community gatherings. 200 people crowded into the main hall, families that Lily's legacy had helped, neighbors who had watched the building rise, reporters documenting this feel-good story for audiences hungry for something besides tragedy and division. Jordan stood at a small podium, looking out at faces both familiar and strange, and felt the weight of every eye focused on her. Zoe sat in the front row, beaming with pride, her new inhaler sitting on the chair beside her. because she never went anywhere without it, but rarely needed it anymore since stress and poverty had loosened their grip. Ray stood in the back, arms crossed, his expression conveying everything that words could not about what this moment meant to him. A year ago, I had $8 in my pocket. Jordan's voice carried through the hall, amplified by microphone, but powered by emotion that needed no technological assistance. That was it. $8 between me and complete despair. I could have kept walking past a dying man. Everyone told me to. The gas station attendant said, "Don't get involved." My neighbor said, "Those guys are dangerous." Common sense said, "Protect yourself." She paused, gathering breath and courage. But I saw a human being who needed help, and I couldn't walk away. I used my last $7 money meant for my daughter's breakfast to buy aspirin and water. I didn't know who he was. I didn't care about the patches on his vest or what club he belonged to. He needed help, and I could give it. Her eyes found Ray's across the crowd. What I've learned is this: kindness is never wasted, even when it costs you everything, especially then, because that kindness comes back not always in money or gifts, but in human connection, in community, in purpose, in the chance to be part of something bigger than your own survival. She could feel tears threatening but forced them back. For 5 years, I struggled alone. I was invisible. Just another single mother working minimum wage jobs, barely surviving one emergency away from complete collapse. But one choice, one moment of compassion changed everything. Not just for me, but for this entire neighborhood. Jordan gestured toward the building around them. This is not about me. This is about what happens when we choose to see each other, really see each other, past the clothes, the patches, the stereotypes. When we recognize the humanity in everyone. When we remember that helping someone else creates ripples we can't predict or control, and those ripples come back to lift us all. The room erupted in applause that felt like physical force. People stood, some crying, others cheering, and Jordan felt something release in her chest that she had been holding clenched for longer than she could remember. Ray walked to the podium, hugged her despite his usual discomfort with public displays of emotion, and turned to address the crowd himself. 20 years ago, I lost my daughter Emma to leukemia. I was angry, broken, convinced the world was fundamentally unfair, and that good people got crushed while bad people prospered. So I made a promise. I would help families who couldn't help themselves. That promise became Lily's legacy, and we've served over 3,000 families since then. His voice roughened with emotion. But I never expected someone to save my life. Jordan gave me a second chance when I was dying in that parking lot. She reminded me that the world still has people who act from pure kindness. That's rare. That's precious. And that's why this building carries her name, because she represents everything Lily's legacy stands for. The ribbon cutting happened with cameras flashing and children laughing and a sense of possibility that felt almost tangible. The doors opened and people flooded in, exploring spaces designed to serve needs Jordan understood intimately because she had lived them. She walked through the building in a daze, shaking hands and accepting thanks and trying to absorb that this was real, that her life had actually changed this much, this fast. 3 months after opening, Clark House had served over 150 families. The food bank distributed supplies to anyone who needed them without judgment or paperwork. The medical clinic provided basic care regardless of insurance status. The after-school program gave working parents like Jordan had been somewhere safe for their children to stay while they hustled to make rent. Jordan's role as community outreach coordinator meant she spent her days meeting families, reviewing applications, connecting people with resources. Everything she had suffered through all the indignity and fear and grinding exhaustion of poverty had become her qualification for understanding exactly what people needed. She helped Rosa, a Latina mother of 3, get the money for her daughter's surgery. She connected Mr. Williams with property tax assistance that saved his home from foreclosure. She found scholarship funding for a 16-year-old girl who wanted to study medicine, but whose family could barely afford food. Each success felt like vindication, like proof that her grandmother had been right about kindness costing nothing but meaning everything. One afternoon, 6 months after opening, Jordan returned to the Shell station where everything began. She had avoided this place deliberately, uncomfortable with confronting the memory of her desperation and the choice that had altered her trajectory so completely. But today felt like the right time to close the circle. She walked into the convenience store and found Brad behind the counter, the same attendant who had told her to walk away from Ray's dying body. He recognized her immediately, his face shifting through emotions too quickly to catalog. "I remember you. You're that lady, the one who helped the biker." "Yeah, that's me." Jordan kept her voice neutral, offering neither judgment nor forgiveness. "I saw what happened after. The news stories, the community center." Brad looked down at the counter, unable to maintain eye contact. "I was wrong about you. About them. I've been following your story. What you built. I'm sorry." Jordan felt the apology settle around her shoulders like weight she had not known she was carrying. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." She asked the manager for permission to place a plaque outside explaining its purpose. The manager, a different person from a year ago, agreed immediately. The plaque was small bronze mounted on the brick wall beside the entrance. It read, "On this spot, a small act of kindness changed everything. Lily's legacy." Jordan stood looking at it for a long moment, thinking about the woman she had been a year ago. Desperate, exhausted, barely holding on. That woman would not recognize the person she had become, but the core remained the same. The willingness to help despite cost. The refusal to walk past suffering even when survival demanded selfishness. Those qualities had not changed, had only been given opportunity to flourish instead of being crushed beneath poverty's weight. The one-year anniversary celebration at Clark House drew over 500 people. The building overflowed with families they had served, volunteers who donated time, neighbors who had learned to see past their initial fear. Balloons and banners transformed the space into something festive, joyful, a stark contrast to the neighborhood's usual air of exhausted survival. Jordan moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and thanked Zoe at her seat, looking healthy and happy in ways that made Jordan's heart ache with gratitude. A young woman approached, white, early 20s, with nervous energy radiating from her posture. "Hi, my name's Sarah. I don't know if you remember, but you helped my mom 6 months ago. She had cancer, couldn't afford treatment. Lily's legacy paid for everything." Jordan searched her memory. "Mrs. Anderson?" Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She's in remission. The doctor said it's a miracle." "But it wasn't a miracle. It was you. It was this place. She's alive because you decided to help someone a year ago." They hugged, both crying, and Jordan felt the full weight of consequences cascading from that single choice in the gas station parking lot. She had saved Ray. Ray had saved her. Together, they had built something that saved hundreds more. The mathematics of kindness operated on principles entirely different from the mathematics of poverty, multiplying instead of dividing, expanding instead of contracting. Mrs. Freeman pulled her aside later, the older woman's face soft with emotion that went deeper than the moment. "Baby, I need to say something. I'm sorry for what I said that morning. For judging you, for judging them." She gestured toward Ray and the other Lily's legacy volunteers scattered through the crowd. "You taught this old woman that it's never too late to change, never too late to see people clearly." Jordan squeezed her hand. "You were trying to protect me. I understand that now. Fear makes sense when you've been hurt before." That evening, after the celebration ended and volunteers cleaned up the detritus of joy, Jordan walked home through her neighborhood. She still walked everywhere, despite having a working car, now preferring the time alone with her thoughts. The streets felt different than they had a year ago. Safer maybe, or perhaps she was simply different and projected that difference onto her surroundings. She passed a different gas station and saw a young man, Latino, early 20s, sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. Jordan stopped, that old instinct pulling at her despite exhaustion from the day. "Hey, you okay?" The young man looked up, eyes red and desperate. "My car broke down. I don't have money for a tow. I'm supposed to pick up my son from daycare in 20 minutes. They charge $1 a minute after closing. I can't afford it." Jordan opened her purse and pulled out $50. The amount that would have seemed like infinite wealth a year ago now felt like exactly what it was, enough to solve an immediate problem while being simultaneously insignificant to her overall financial situation. She handed it to him. "What? No, I can't." The young man stared at the money like it might bite him. "Yes, you can." Jordan pressed it into his hand. "Get your car towed, get your son, and when you're back on your feet, help someone else. Pass it on." She pulled out a Lily's legacy card and handed it over. "If you ever need more help, call that number. We're here for people like you, for people like I used to be." The young man's face crumpled, tears streaming as he clutched the money. "I won't forget this. I swear. I know you won't." Jordan smiled, feeling her grandmother's presence so strongly it was almost physical. "That's how it works." She walked away without waiting for more thanks, her heart full in ways she was still learning to process. The cycle continued. Kindness creating more kindness. Pain transformed into purpose. Suffering that had felt meaningless revealed as preparation for a role she had not known she was being trained to fill. At home, Zoe was already asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement. Jordan sat at their kitchen table, the same wobbly table from a year ago, because some things remained unchanged as anchors to remind her where she had been. She pulled out her journal, opened to a blank page, and wrote, "1. I have become the person my grandmother believed I could be. 2. Zoe will grow up knowing kindness is strength, not weakness. 3. Tomorrow, someone else will need help, and I will be ready." She closed the journal and walked to the window, looking out at her street transformed by streetlights and the absence of fear. Tomorrow she would go to Clark House and review applications from families drowning in the same poverty that had nearly killed her. She would connect them with resources, help them navigate systems designed to be impenetrable, advocate for people who had forgotten how to advocate for themselves. She would do this work not because it was easy or because she had been rescued and now felt obligated, but because she had learned that being saved and becoming a savior were the same thing viewed from different angles. Somewhere across town, Ray was probably sitting in his own kitchen, looking at Emma's picture and feeling something close to peace. Somewhere else, Mrs. Freeman was telling her church group about the woman who taught her to see past appearances. Somewhere in Flint, Marcus Carter was counseling another veteran through PTSD. Somewhere in every city and town touched by Lily's legacy, people were making choices influenced by help they had received from strangers who became family. Jordan closed her eyes and let herself feel gratitude so profound it bordered on religious experience. She had spent $7 in a gas station parking lot. She had given everything she had to save someone she did not know. And that choice had echoed forward through time and space, creating ripples that lifted boats she would never see, helping people whose names she would never learn, building a future where kindness was not weakness, but the strongest force available to humans trying to survive a world designed to break them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ray. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for letting me save yours, for building this with us, for proving that redemption is real and people can change and the world is not irredeemably broken." Jordan typed back, "Thank you for seeing me, for believing I was worth saving, for showing me that one moment can change everything if we're brave enough to act." She set the phone down and looked one more time at Zoe, sleeping peacefully in her real bed, in their safe apartment, in their transformed neighborhood. This was what $7 had purchased. Not just a life saved, but hundreds of lives improved. A community healed, a future where her daughter would grow up knowing that kindness was not just possible, but expected, that people who looked different or lived different or believed different were still people deserving of compassion and help. Jordan walked to her bedroom, lay down beside Zoe, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families needing help, new opportunities to pass forward the gift she had been given. But tonight she let herself rest secure in the knowledge that she had become exactly who she needed to be, that her suffering had not been meaningless, that the choice she made in that parking lot had been the right one in ways that transcended right and wrong into something approaching grace. Somewhere in the darkness, her grandmother's voice whispered the words that had guided her entire life. "Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we got to give." Jordan smiled, feeling the truth of it in her bones, and let sleep take her toward dreams where $7 could save the world.